That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Hello, and welcome back to your favorite podcast at the intersection of faith and fear, where every week, and especially this year, and especially today, we discuss what scares us in order to find what saves us. This is the fear of God. Speaking to you right now is one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse, and typically with me is longtime chum Reed Lackey. And he was here, but he said he had to go let a hedgehog into his court. In the meantime, allow me to welcome you, listeners, back into our big series for the year, What Scares Us / What Saves Us, a series defined by you. You've been submitting your stories of films and media that instilled or stoked a certain fearful imagining in you, and we are covering them right here on the show. But I'm getting ahead of myself because here at the Fear of God, we explore. We don't explain, except for right now when I explain that you can listen to the Fear of God at your nearest podcast platform. You can watch the Fear of God on YouTube, and you can browse the Fear of God on the web, where you will find Afterthoughts blog series, currently now What's Your Wednesday blog series, and you'll also find Reed.
I think that's actually the Super Mario NES thing. I was trying to conjure the song for Sonic the Hedgehog, but I could not.
I don't even know what that would be.
I'm not sure. I just remember it would always go faster at a certain point, and you'd get all the rings.
You were definitely doing Mario Brothers.
Yeah, I know.
Once the
spirit. Yeah.
Once the time started running out on you.
That's right.
You gotta get
You're
to
like,
the end of the level.
You gotta get to the flag. I don't know what's happening.
Where's the warp whistle?
Wow. Yeah. So hey, man.
Hey.
I don't know what to do. So yeah, you already kind of, here we are at the end of this long journey through the continent. We are going to be talking about episode 7
there's
and
a
8.
Joke somewhere in there about incontinent. I've been racking my brain for it though. I can't find it. So maybe listeners
he pooped on him, girl.
60 years of majoring and never pooped on me before.
Oh my gosh. So yeah. So but yeah, we're going to be going into The Witcher. We'll do that in just a little bit. You covered most of our business time before, so we just Afterthoughts blogs, Watch Your Wednesdays. I'm going to inaugurate the first few, and then I'll give you a chance eventually. Okay, we'll see. We'll just see how it goes.
I kind of doubt that. Right. Wait, Nathan.
No, we'll just see.
The nightstand is very tall right now. The nightstand pile is very tall.
No. You've cut me out from talking about the 23 books that I read last month. So I'm just kidding. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
So, yes. Well, check out the website. All that good stuff.
Business time. Go read some blogs. Tell your friends.
Learn to throw your friends. Fun parties.
Oh my gosh. So Reed, we need to address the person, Mr. Jacob Sane, who offered us The Witcher, because we're not doing a Watcha.
No, we're not doing
a Watcha for The Witcher.
No Watcha for The Witcher, because without the Watcha Wednesdays. So
he's like, Watcha.
What'd you think about that? So as we have been prone to do, when we didn't have the submitter on the show to talk about themselves, we invited them to record their own voice, sharing their submission with us, which has been a lot of fun. Hopefully listeners have had that as well. It's probably a little anxiety inducing hearing yourself, but Jacob had given us quite a substantial pitch for The Witcher. So I'm going to give you the floor. I'm going to go refresh my drink. So take it away, Jacob.
Hey Reed, hey Nathan. Hello, fellow foggers. First off, I just wanted to say thank you for covering The Witcher. It's been a lot of fun. And to my fellow listeners out there, if you've been along for the ride and jumped in head first without knowing what you were getting into, God bless you. I've definitely enjoyed listening to everyone, and hearing Reed and Nathan find their way through the continent, they asked me to send this recording of my original submission, and I'm just going to read it exactly like I wrote it. Okay, here it goes. Here's my pitch for The Witcher. My pitcher? Whatever. I know it's a TV series, but with just one season on Netflix, I think it's pretty accessible. It's also likely not the scariest submission you will receive, but I think it has some good substantive meat on its bones and enough frightening images to qualify. From a classic creature feature perspective, you really do get some gnarly sights and ghastly frights. The monsters have a wonderful aesthetic, but it's Geralt that scares people. Witchers are inhuman, you see, and while they are tolerated, they're certainly not accepted by the common folk. They take money to do a job, namely kill monsters, so people can relate to that, but at the end of the day, they are not welcome in the ordinary lives of the average man. So here we have a societal scare. Do we only accept those who are different from us as long as they are useful and earn their keep? Should a minority have to have exceptional skills just to be one of us? It makes me think, what if I were marked or different in some way? I'm not sure I'd be able to go above and beyond just to prove I'm equal to those around me. Secondly, what scares me in The Witcher is the idea that our fates are inevitable. Geralt is very cautious towards Geralt is very callous towards the notion of fate or destiny when we first meet him, but by the end of season 1, he is forced to acknowledge that a certain fate is inescapable for him, for better or worse. Words like predeterminism and Calvinism come to mind. What's scarier, an inevitable conclusion to our lives no matter what we do, or the weight of consequence that comes with the freedom of our actions? Fate, while certainly intimidating, can in some ways absolve us of our choices. Freedom, on the other hand, is downright paralyzing when we aren't prepared to accept the mantle of responsibility. Regardless, these are a few takeaways I had from The Witcher. Even if you never end up covering it on The Fog, I do hope you'll give the show a chance and find some enjoyment out of Henry Cavill slicing up beasties. Thanks again, everyone. Reed, Nathan, I leave The Witcher in your hands.
Thank you, Jacob, for your offering and for introducing us to the continent where the top song on the pop charts is "Put Another Nickel in that Nickelodeon."
Wow.
All they ever wanna do is hire a witcher, a witcher, a witcher.
Oh my God.
Woo! Read.
Oh, that
Just
old
the all
black
singing,
magic.
all dancing version these days of Fear of God.
I suppose so. It ain't
Yeah.
that bad though. It ain't that bad though.
No.
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
Do we we've been prone in recent weeks to take scary moments from the thing and just sort of make a little game out of it. But that's hard to do in a TV show. You got any thoughts on that?
It's true. Well, I do. I've got a thought. I
really
appreciate that rather organic toss. You just
really?
because you know what? I'm just gonna go
Tossed
for
you
it
an
and be like, those ain't right. They ain't right. Them ain't right. Those ain't right. Because on this installment, Reed,
these ain't right.
all of them witches, all of them monsters.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Wow. So no, we're not going to do scary scenes, Reed, this installment. Because something that is, and look, you'll love this. I've actually got a handwritten thing.
What? Where did you find a pen? I don't think I didn't make those anymore.
Yeah,
it's all
turns out
keyboards.
It was quill. It's quill and ink.
Oh,
I
wow.
went Witcher times.
Wow.
No, but endemic to the mythos of the Witcher is that he is a monster hunter.
Yes.
And so actually something that is present throughout the season 1 of of Netflix's The Witcher. Be sure you add that there.
The Netflixes.
Because there are multiple iterations of Witchers. There's the books, there's the games, there's the Netflix show. Funny story. I was recently at my fellow vaccinated buddy Steven Scagrove's house. And his wife was playing a video game. And I was like, what you playing? What you? I was like,
what you playing?
Oh
my gosh.
And she was like, oh, it's The Witcher. I was like, oh, what? And she was, I stood there and watched, and I was like, no, who is that? Because I could tell who Geralt was, though he was no Cavill, let's be clear. But he's talking.
Testament is better in real life.
And she's like, that's my vampire friend. I was like, nope, that sounds right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the spirit of the vampire friend present in apparently The Witcher 3, which I really have no idea what I'm talking about.
And me either.
What we're going to do is I'm going to catalog for you real quickly the monsters of The Witcher season 1. I feel like I've hit I'm entering Witcher school.
Okay.
Because I watched a video today to figure out what were all the monsters in season 1 so that we could those ain't right with the monsters.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
I'm going to tell you the monsters that show up. And if I remember, I'll give you a little note on it. So
and if you don't, who cares?
Yep. The first monster we encounter is in the very first scene, and as you alluded to a few weeks ago, that is the
spider
Kikimora.
Whatever. No, it's a Kikimora. That's right. It's a Kikimora.
Yes.
Yeah.
In episode 1,
not spider pig.
Is
it's
the big
Kikimora.
spider monster.
Yes.
Big dog, loaf of bread.
System error.
So there's the Kikimora. In episode 2 is the horned goat thing, which is called a Sylvan. By the way,
Sylvan.
Yes.
Okay.
And
all right.
that is the episode
I was almost. I thought you were saying that was the horned goat thing. I was like, oh, they just gave up and just called it the horned goat thing.
Yes.
But no, it's the Sylvan.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, it's the Sylvan. Yeah.
Look upon the horned goat of the continent. Right. It's like the most generic names we can find.
Wow. Everything else, oh no, that's not a spider. That's a Kikimora.
Yeah.
What's a horned goat?
I mean, it's okay. So I got the Kikimora.
Yeah.
Now what is that thing? Oh, it's the horned goat.
It's a horned goat.
Oh,
I thought really nothing
right,
fancy.
Right. It's like RoboCop. No. It's like, okay.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm like, okay. All right.
Okay. So you got the Kikimora. You got the Sylvan.
Okay.
You have the Striga, which you'll remember.
Striga.
Which is the cursed female, and they are predominantly females in the world of The Witcher, are Strigas. This one particularly was cursed pre-birth, so she came into the world a Striga. Then you have what actually this video, which was pulling from all it was pooling from The Witcher. So the next beastie is the ant monster thing, the Psycho Jiminy Cricket that you
Psycho Jiminy Cricket.
They actually said they cited this as unknown. They did suggest it's possibly an Endraga.
Endraga.
I
prefer Psycho Jiminy Cricket.
Kikimora. Now I'm gonna shout out here. They included this as a monster, so this is not me being a horned goat. They threw Dooney the Hedgehog in
the
list of monsters.
All right. So Dooney the Hedgehog.
Sonic
and Knuckles. Sonic and Knuckles, like, his ousted cousin.
Yeah.
Dooney's all like, well, I want a ring. Anyway.
Okay. Then you have the Doppler, which is not to be confused with the German family and the TV show Dark. But that is the shapeshifter. Thank you. The shapeshifter. It's
not called a Doppler, it's called a shapeshifter? Or
well, no, I'm articulating what the type of monster is. Like the horned goat is called a Sylvan. No. The shapeshifter is called a Doppler. However, this is a true story, true fact here from the world of The Witcher. I'm telling you. I'm on my way to being a Meister.
You're there.
Witcherdom. The most famous Doppler in Witcher lore is, I'm not making this up, his name is Dudu.
Doppler. Do the Doppler.
Which makes sense on the incontinent.
Like, oh, doo.
Takes whatever shape it needs to.
But still can't get rid of the smell. All shapes and sizes.
You know your Dopplers.
Oh, man.
next on the list, with not nearly as fun a name, is the Jinn.
Yeah.
Who was articulated in the video I watch as one of the most powerful entities in Witcherdom.
Makes sense, sure.
I did not remember this until I saw the footage in the video here, but it's called a Harika. Now the Harika is it's a blink and you miss it, but it's the tall, hairy golem thing in the
the one that they unceremoniously butcher because all he wants is some food. I mean, the Witcher even said in there, like Geralt even said, like if we'd fed him, he would go away. You crazy people. So,
well, that was Yennefer's Lancelot that did that, right?
Yeah.
And then he got
Doppler.
And then he got indigestion.
He
did.
He got some.
Okay, so the final two here are the dragons, of course, which are just the beasts, and then they say that, or this person in this YouTube video I watched, which was a learned video, they were further along in their Witcher studies than I am. They implied the potential that the creatures that attack Geralt in 7, I think.
Yes. Okay.
That's the top of 8. I don't remember.
It's the top of 8. The ones that bite him on the leg.
Yes.
Ghouls.
He said they might be ghouls. Did you?
Ghouls. No,
did you just make that up? Did you just say that?
I did not make that up. I don't know. I just
now, however, he said ghouls in Witcher lore do typically attack from beneath the earth, like they burrow, but they don't have a sort of poison bite like what happens to Witcher. And,
interesting.
And this gentleman was speculating, was that made up for the show? So,
he should
Reed,
call somebody.
Quick reiteration again. Kikamora, Sylvan, the horned goat, the Striga, the ant monster, Dooney the hedgehog, Doppler Doodoo, Jinn, Harika, dragons, and ghouls. Okay, I'm gonna start with you. What is, if you were to quickly in your brain make a 3-1, and
on this game we go top to bottom, right? Like it's
okay, sure, yep. You pick your worst, pick your poison.
Okay, so
what is the most monstrous?
Already know my worst, man. Striga, like freaking, like in terms of creature design, in terms of frights, in terms of power, strength, intimidation. I still think, now that I've seen it all, I think my favorite episode of the series was episode 3. I think that whole plot line of Geralt versus the Striga really just was very galvanizing in a lot of ways. But that creature design is just terrifying. Some of those shots where the Striga is like running at him. So so my worst. Well,
and I didn't do the research to know this, so it's surely an authoritative statement, but it appears to be pretty practical effects in a decent portion of that. I'm sure there's probably some digital enhancement. I gotta be honest, I think mine, he deserves it, but I'm not going to put Dooney there just because I don't want to be that guy. But I really am not a Dooney fan. I'm just playing. Hedgehogs of the world. You can rest easy. For me, it's the ant monster. That thing was wicked.
Psycho Jiminy Cricket, right? Yeah, man.
Yeah.
This is
Jiminy
gnarly.
Cricket's song?
When You Wish Upon a Star. Yeah.
When you kill a Yennefer. Or a
Yennefer Divine the Bark. Yes.
But yes, that thing was,
gnarly.
Well, I won't say that because you might put it as your third one here, but there's another. I would have maybe picked the Kikamora, but I think visually that thing is so arresting, and the way it's lit in the episode it shows up in it's
Yeah.
very intimidating and monstrous, and it's a very quick register of like, okay, that thing I do not want near me.
Yeah, and it's freaking fast. Yeah, like
Yeah.
it goes for you. Like it's just no,
Uh-uh.
And I mean that whole thing about it, that moment in that episode, that whole thing about like jumping portals to get away from it, but it's just like like you've got to open that portal and you've got to jump through before it gets down there, and man, that sucker is just like fast and vicious and brutal, and yeah, dude, freaking good choice. Good choice.
Okay. Do you have a third? Or are you
I
done?
do.
Okay.
So no, doo-doo is not my third choice. No,
It's
I'm gonna
never
I guess we'll call them ghouls.
First choice. Okay.
Those things. I mean, that's like there's a couple of shots. They're not in it for long. I mean, they're in it for like the first 5 minutes of the top of episode 8. But man, that's pretty. Like when they pop up and everything. I mean, we've seen plenty of zombie like creatures in the run of this podcast, but those ghouls are very. I mean, they've got this like lit eyes, and it's and then there's like their mouths are all like sharp fanged, obviously like gaping, but then they look quite skeletal in terms of their general sort of slight frame, and then the burrowing under the ground and everything.
A little bit of Stalfos energy going on there. Do you know what a Stalfos is, Reed?
Wow.
No,
I don't know what a Stalfos.
You might struggle with that one, which that is not a derisive comment towards your knowledge base, other than a Stalfos is the skeletons in Zelda.
Oh yeah. I just my Zelda lore knowledge is okay. I walk up here, I poke that thing. Oh wait.
Someone out there is along with me on this.
Yeah. The one.
No, there's more.
No.
Somebody. I need someone on Facebook in the group to be like, I got you, Nathan. Like,
I was there. I was with you. Oh man. So yeah, those are my top 3 of
Those ain't right. Those ain't right. Those ain't right. Doo-doo ain't right.
Doo-doo ain't right. Doo-doo ain't right. The Doppler is doo-doo. What were they thinking? There were some people making up that thing that were just like doo-doo. Let's see if this flies. And then somebody's just like, I don't care. I've signed enough checks. We're just going to write this down.
Yeah.
Flung doo-doo.
Flung poo.
Oh, man. Okay, so yes. So I think we should probably... Here's what I want to say.
What? What do you want to do?
What are you no, what are you doing?
No, what do you want to say? Because I was about to ask something.
Well, go ahead. No,
not
you
a
ask
question.
it.
So, it's a question because those get asked. But
yeah.
In general, we finished this season.
Yes.
And I'll answer for myself.
Okay.
While you ponder, and also because I want to take some of the venom out, or the concerns of venom. In general, what are your feelings on season 1 of The Witcher, having completed it now? And I will say for me, I think I'll frame it this way. Towards the end, 7 and 8 did a lot to raise the tide. To the point that for a split second, I was like, would I rewatch this to see how I assess it again? I'm not, but I did have the thought.
The answer to that is no. But...
right, but not out of malice. In this case, it was simply, who's got the time for that? But once notes like, oh, Geralt is in the cell at the bottom of Sintra, at the sacking of Sintra. I was like, okay, now that's cool. That's cool. Really I like it. So yeah, 7 and 8 did a lot to raise the tide for me on my general attitude towards the show. To the point that, who knows if we'll end up covering it on the podcast or not, but it raised the bar enough that I'd be like, okay, I'm kind of down for whatever's next, and mildly energized towards when that happens. So yeah,
sure.
That's my sort of assessment at the last of season 1 of The Witcher. What about you?
So a very similar place. One more note about Geralt sitting in the cell. I should have remembered this. I didn't remember it until they come back to check on him and find him empty, that we saw that scene in episode 1, that we saw them come down and look at an empty cell, but I didn't know at that moment, I didn't know what that meant, but that moment is in episode 1 where they come down and they look at the cell, and I, yeah, sure. But I remember when they started sacking Sintra, and I was like, oh man. And then it pivoted to Geralt in that, sort of cage. I was like, oh, this is cool. I didn't realize that. And so I think, like, to your point, I think 7 really elevated the energy a lot. Like, it was a great ramp up. We can maybe get into some more details in general, but to answer your question directly, my one major, I have two. I have 2 major sort of beefs with season 1 as a whole. I will lead with those and then end on my overall feelings, which are generally positive. So my 2 major beefs with the show is, I think in this season, the only reason to care about Ciri is because the show repeatedly tells me to. There's nothing narratively to make me care about Ciri. And that disappointed me because I hoped by the end that I would. So that's one major beef, because we spend a decent amount of time with her, but other than our time spent with her in episode 1, I never really cared after that. So that's one thing.
You are heartless, though.
Wow.
Wow, I'm just kidding.
Do the Doppler there. So, but my second sort of beef with it, this is probably going to sound a little bit odd, but the way that they ended this season feels to me, I'm going to say it the way I thought it. It felt to me like they ended the season on their next to last episode. I did not feel that it was terribly resolved. I felt like it was very much like, the Yennefer plotline differently. Like the Yennefer thing, I feel like had a really strong arc, some really good stuff. I loved a lot of where they took her in episode 7 and episode 8. Like, it really wound up being some of my favorite moments of the season, revolving around her in sort of coming into her own and stepping up as the mage to kind of be protective and fight the fight. Just some great moments, performance-wise, some great moments, visually speaking. And so anyway, but I felt like I really kind of got quite moved when Geralt and Ciri finally find each other and they hug and everything. I was like, oh, cool. This is great. But then... I'm just going to tell it like it is. Like, then, like, they hug, they embrace. This has been the resolution of everything. And then Geralt says the most obvious thing on top of, like, people with destinies will find each other. Like, I felt like this was like the voiceover narration on that moment. And then Ciri pulls back and it's just like, who's Yennefer? And then cut to the credits. And I was like, what? This is so a setup for what's coming in season 2. And so so I'm listing that as a complaint, but it pivots into something else. And this is why I wanted to end this way is, I feel like the season kind of ended on its next to last episode. That having been said, when season 2 drops, which it will later this year in the fall, I will probably, whether we're covering it or not, cue it up and see where the story goes, because it did sort of leave me wanting more. I felt a bit frustrated in the fact that it felt a bit unformed in its whole narrative complexity. I liked the way everything was pulling together, but I feel like the only really comprehensible and substantive arc that this season gives us is Yennefer's. They're playing around with a lot of other interesting things, particularly with Geralt, but in terms of just like a cohesive, emotionally rich and satisfying story, it's Yennefer. Like, we start with her at her lowest point. We end with her in a moment of profound self-sacrificial triumph. So, and I don't get the impression that she's like dead at the end. She's just, she's vanished. And I'm sure the show will tell us what that means or where she is. But it's a really good arc of narrative and a good arc of character. They take them through some highs, some lows, some bad choices, coming back around to redemptive choices. So anchoring in the character of Yennefer, I feel like that's where the show really does right by her. Episode 5 and all the nakedness notwithstanding, I feel like that character just in general, that's what I mean when I say like really do right by her. Sure. There's still like an asterisk on that one episode, but everywhere else, like there's a ton
emphasis on ass. What?
Whoa. But so those are my feelings about season 1 of The Witcher.
Just thinking of our last week episode about Candyman and just the tomfoolery that happened there, and common denominator here is Reed. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow.
I'm kidding. Yeah, I for as ambivalent as I was at the start of the season, and fair honesty, because like you, I wouldn't say catapulted, but I am propelled into whatever's next with some interest.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. Yeah.
In full transparency, after episode 2, I was like, Reed, are we on? Are we in? Are we on the continent yet? Yeah.
Doing this? Yes.
Just because I had no idea, and it was very confusing. So what you want to do? Do you want to just jump into 7 and 8 and kind of talk a little bit about?
So what I will say is that in many ways, 7 and 8 feel like a 2-part episode as opposed to 2 distinct episodes. So I think it's fair. Listeners might have been a little bit frustrated that we shunted episode 7 to this conversation as opposed to covering it last. There were a couple of different reasons for that. Primarily, the reason was to give a lot of time to talk about Candyman, which, as y'all heard, was a lengthy conversation. The secondary reason of that is that I really do feel like 7 and 8 are a singular piece. And I feel like, so as we're talking about sort of specifics and everything, I mentioned already, I did like quite a bit the stuff that they were doing with Geralt, specifically in 8. But in both of these episodes, with just his connecting to an emotional landscape, because Witchers apparently are supposed to have like no emotional ties, no emotional real estate. So the fact that he's experiencing so much like devotion and even regret over, the apparent demise of Ciri, culminating in, this is going to seem like a weird comparison, but you remember Man on Fire, the Denzel Washington film?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it not registering because I think the trailers had given away that the girl was still alive in that movie. But I remember it not registering until like after reflection that as Denzel Washington's character is moving through his vengeance, he thinks the little girl that he's taking revenge on is dead. And so then when in the moment towards the end of that film where he sees that she is not dead, and the emotional reaction that he has to that is pretty affecting and pretty profound.
Greasy bear.
Yep. not to get into, all the specifics of Man on Fire, which we're not talking about, but I had a comparable sort of connecting point with Geralt in this, that I knew Ciri's alive, but he's going through this, and I'm seeing the look on his face, and I'm seeing like his sort of despair to everything that he feels he has, tremendously failed. He's failed this girl, and maybe failed, his vows, and maybe failed just as a being, that he's lacked his purpose. And so I really liked where they did in that moment. Then they take him to kind of his lowest place and take him back to what started this all, which I have to confess is a little confusing. I had to do a little bit of homework after the fact to really sort of touch on what was happening with his mom, and basically that his mom had left him on the doorstep of that place, or just sort of abandoned him out there, where that's where he eventually became a Witcher. And him reflecting on all of those different things and then confronting her, albeit in a dreamlike vision. I thought that was all really strong, and I liked that a lot. Getting back to why I had mentioned Man on Fire, when he hears about the girl in the woods and you see the look on his face, Cavill's performance and Geralt as a character, you see that, and then he goes charging off in the woods to find her. I think that's what really propels that moment and makes it substantive when they finally do see each other and embrace. I didn't quite know why Ciri knew him. Did you know why Ciri knew him? Why Ciri knew who he was? Do you think she just felt
it?
She was
told,
but she'd never seen what he looked like.
Oh, well, yeah, but by the same token, why is she asking about Yennefer? How would she have known her?
Yep, I'm sold. That's done. Yep, that's it.
I mean, other than her, communing with Groot, I don't know how she knows half the things she knows.
No, that's a good point, though. I had forgotten, or maybe the show didn't firmly tell me very well that she has this inciting knowledge.
Well,
but yeah.
but and I think there's a legitimate question there about her knowledge of Yennefer, and not that your question is illegitimate, but what I wonder is, based on what we've seen in the TV show so far, Geralt is the only Witcher we've seen. Now,
Second,
are they? Huh? Who else? Oh yeah,
the Witcher got killed
one.
by the Striga in episode 3. Yeah.
I guess what I was trying to articulate there is there a certain armament, a certain demeanor, a certain sigil that visually conjures them as Witchers? Thus, would she see him, Geralt, and know, oh, that's the Witcher, that's the one I've been told? You know what I mean? Like, I wonder.
Yeah, maybe.
But again, I think it's a fair critique that there's a lot for all the show does relay. There's a lot that it kind of leaves obscured.
Sure.
Just
right.
kind of filling in the blanks on my own.
Because I knew why he knew her, because one of my favorite parts about 7 is when they're going back and showing like the parts of the same scenes that we didn't see. So like when she's playing the game out in the city and doesn't realize that he's watching her from the doorway. And, so that game in the city was, again, in episode 1, but we never were shown that he was watching her from the doorway. And that's how he realized that Calanthe had tried to pull a fast one and present him with somebody that was not the princess. So he knew Ciri clearly.
And they were like, I'm sorry, Geralt, but your princess is in another castle.
I'm so happy you did that. That was great. That was great. But yeah, so again, like really enjoyed all of that, but I have most of my complaints that I would level at the show mostly involve laudable, bold, creative narrative choices that I don't think landed as well as I would have wanted them to for me. But I applaud their creativity. I applaud their risk taking. It just did not land as well for me as I suspected it would. What's funny though is I did look up the article that I alluded to, I think a couple of episodes ago, where I was talking about like, oh yeah, it's one of the most watched shows. When Netflix,
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, when Netflix released, it's their number 1 most watched TV show, original TV show.
Okay, that's not the factoid I thought you were about to drop, because I did screenshot this, and I'm glad you said that because I had forgotten. But let's be savvy consumers and discerners of press releases, because you'll remember circa Bird Box that it has like most watched movie in Netflix's history, but the metric,
the 2-minute thing,
that's where I'm going with this is previously to that. It was if they watched something for so long, like that counted as a view. Well,
they had to watch 75% of it. Yeah.
Netflix recently changed its viewership metric from 70% of an episode under the previous down to 2 minutes under the new metric. The new metric gives viewing figures 35% higher on average than the previous one. So like it says, then this is on the Wikipedia for the show, the 76 million views in its first month based on the new metric is the largest for a Netflix series launch. Because listen, I don't want to take away from the fan base of The Witcher.
Absolutely
I do
not,
think what a joke of a metric.
2 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, I get it.
Come on.
Yeah. That's an accident. That's
right. You're like, wait
a second. This ain't.
I thought I was watching Game of Thrones.
This ain't Man of Steel. What am I doing? What is this? Right. No, I get it.
So yeah, I it's not a moment to get into a conversation about big tech and the lies they feed to us, but
Mitchell's versus machines.
Come on, the metric by which we determine if a person watches thing is if they watch 2 minutes of an hour-long TV show. Oh, they watched it. That counts.
They clicked on it. And I mean, I will say that I think there's validity to a metric of how are you marketing it such that people want to click on it, and that's perfectly fine. But if you're going to talk about viewership, 2 minutes is not substantial. 2 minutes is enough time to give up on your show.
That's like if you want to use that metric, use it for episodes of Bluey on Disney Plus.
Yeah, because that's a third of its
show. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
2 minutes is a third of its runtime.
Okay.
Yeah,
and if you're only watching 2 minutes of Bluey, what is really wrong with you?
Who are you really?
Finish that stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, if you're watching 2 minutes of The Witcher, that's the person who's like, I don't get it.
Yeah, that's the Kikamora. Like, you watch the Kikamora scene and said, I'm out.
Yeah.
And then like that'd be the end of it. Well, I saw The Witcher. I saw that one, spider baby. So yeah, I mean, but I mean, I do think, again, to your point, that's not to take away from the substantive fan base that it does.
Yeah.
I mean, because I've seen metrics before where like objective metrics of all of pop culture where they talk about like just the mass amount of money that games make. Like, I'm not into this like I was when I had the NES. So, but like, evidently,
I mean, that was 35 years ago, right?
I know. Yeah, I know. It's good times. So, but no, where I'm going with this is that, like, I'm not really attuned to what the latest and greatest, hottest game and game system is, because I'm just not. That's just not my. That's not my bag. So when people tell me, "Oh, yes, Metal Gear Solid or whatever is the most popular selling piece of entertainment in history," or whatever it is, that overwhelms me a bit, because I'm like, really? I'm not part of that.
Well, it's funny. You keep bringing these things I thought about today, which is awesome that you're like in my brain. You're occupying space in my brain.
Yeah.
But yeah. Because I thought about the video game thing comparison.
Yeah.
And there is a key difference, though, which is, well, it's probably multiples, but the one that came to me as I was pondering this today is like, there is a credible metric to say, I don't know if this is true, but like, as in like, oh, Witcher 3 is the highest grossing video game of all time. There's an easy way to measure that. How many people bought the game, thus, regardless of whether they played it beginning to end.
Yeah,
it was purchased.
They may never put it in. Right, it was purchased.
Netflix is operating under this super shaky, smoky, smoke and mirrors kind of metric of like, oh, it's the most watched thing in the history of watched things. It's like, well, no, 2 minutes of it is, maybe, but...
Then Netflix updates their metrics again, and it's like, if the word Witcher appeared anywhere on social media, we count that as a view, and then it just moves to W. Like if the letter W appears, exactly, and it's like
most impressions ever in the history of impressions. I'm
best ever. Yeah, I mean, like, so
that's a Cavill reference.
Is it? Oh yeah, that's right, from Zack Snyder's Justice League. That's right. So the but again, like, getting back to the thing, like, it's clear that it has, because I will say this. Pour a very, very stiff, hard drink out for Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, which I thought was magnificent and deserved a second season.
Magnificent.
That
did it get canceled?
It did. It got canceled after one season, despite winning an Emmy. So Netflix will not pony up the cash for something that's not, driving subscriptions, driving legitimate viewerships, regardless of what metrics they're willing to publish. They will not fork over the cash for something that's not making them money. There may be some worlds where they're willing to fork over cash on a first season, because who knows? But once and maybe even for a second season because of like some interest or whatever, but they are now in the place right now where a follow-up season is no longer a guarantee with Netflix. Right. And since they're so secretive about their measurements and metrics, I have to imagine the fact that we got Witcher season 2 so swiftly on the cusp of the other that yes, it is probably a very, very high watched, whatever they decide to publish on it, but it I'm sure it has a significant and substantial fan base. And again, like, I think my discouragement with the film was
the show.
Sorry, with the show. I keep saying film. But I think my discouragement with the show was how much work I had to do to keep pace with it. That is something that just sort of, I was down for it. And when the show 3 or 4 times through the run of the season when the show swept me away. Episode 3, particularly, I believe it's episode 4 in the banquet hall. Lots of stuff in episode 7 and 8. When the show swept me away, that was tremendous fun. It was great. I just I do wish that I'd been able to just sort of like plug in, and that it would have been just like, oh yeah, this is fantastic. It's a show that I now can't wait to share with people and talk about. As it kind of stands, it's basically probably going to come up in occasional conversation and be like, did you see The Witcher? And they'll be like, oh no, I didn't. I'll be like, okay, well,
okay.
Did you see something
2 minutes
else?
of it?
Did you see two minutes of it?
Because if you did, you watched it.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, I've shared some of my thoughts on 7 and 8, but I haven't given you a chance to do so yourself.
I mean, they're going to be pretty similar, but it's funny because I don't love going back to this well over and over, but its fans do. The Game of Thrones comparison, and
right.
I'll do it this way. Here's an interesting inroad. Had we done a watcha on this episode, what I might have thrown in is I just started the TV show Lost with my 2 oldest kids.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I on the show over the years have flirted with this type of conversation, or this topic at least. And it just really begs looking at, in light of, these are 3 very different on a certain level, similar on some levels, but Game of Thrones, The Witcher, Lost. So we are 7 episodes into season 1 of Lost. Just finished Solitary, which is Saeed.
Oh, that's Saeed, right?
And Nadia's story. And watching this I don't remember the last time I restarted Lost. It's been a minute. And knowing what I know about the show's production in the ensuing years since I first watched it, and because I'm watching it with my kids, I'm watching it with a different eye.
Yeah, certainly.
And it's just fascinating because and I'll add to that mix my opinion of J.J. Abrams these days, because he helped with the pilot and then kind of jumped ship for Mission Impossible. But it is very clear watching these first half a dozen plus episodes, they are treading narrative water to tell character stories, to figure out what their narrative is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so why I throw that in the mix right here is a thing I miss. In a general sense, I don't miss 20 plus episode seasons of television, like
right,
Life and Time. That would be pretty intimidating these days, depending on what it is, depending on how compelling it is. But shows that got that format and formula right, at least in large part, your Losts, your X-Files,
right,
teased out. I don't even mean a mythology or a narrative. I mean just character work. What I don't feel like I get, predominantly, I'm not even talking explicitly about The Witcher. What is hard to come by in modern TV storytelling is deep character work that helps me plug in, helps me relate, helps me understand. And of season 1 of The Witcher, I'll set it right against season, whatever, was it 8 of Game of Thrones? A much more truncated. Now, you just made a face, which I don't disagree with, but season 8 of Game of Thrones compared to seasons 1 through 7 of Game of Thrones is the problem. Season 8 of Game of Thrones on it by itself, you might have been like, that's kind of cool.
Right.
It was the end of something that was much more thoughtful and paced, that it felt so disconnected.
Right.
I said this 2 or 3 episodes ago. I actually am interested in the story The Witcher was trying to tell. It was the storytelling that got in the way sometimes. And part of that is just the fault of the medium and its current incarnation, which is, there's 8 episodes that have to serve a lot of masters narratively.
Right.
And ultimately what happens is you get a whole lot of plot and not a lot of really interesting kind of character stuff. And so to
Sure.
bring it back to Lost, it's like, think about it. Like the version of Lost you get is kind of the season 1 through 7 Game of Thrones. We don't totally know where this is going to land, so we need to kind of hold at arm's reach,
Right.
a terminal point, because we don't know. So
Right.
we're kind of, it's not filler per se. It kind of starts to feel that way
right.
at a certain point with Lost. I'll own that, but it's not so much filler as much as it's just we need to get creative and do the work of storytelling.
Right. Of course.
Which is
Yes.
Characters, why they do the things they do,
Mm-hmm.
why that matters to me as someone engaging in their stories.
Right.
That is what gets really hard to find in something like The Witcher, which again is not solely the fault of the IP as much as it in this case is the fault of the format. Does that make sense at all?
No, it definitely does. No, it absolutely does.
Such that I'm sorry to cut you off. I really am sorry.
No, you're okay.
But this was the tail end of that, because watching 7 and 8, and I would say the end of 7 and the bulk of 8 specifically, I was like, you know what? This is cool. This is cool stuff that is relevant to earlier episodes that I didn't understand a lick of. So I didn't quite know how on earth I was supposed to consume it or process it or digest it, such that by the time it comes back around, I'm just like, oh, I remember that person. Oh,
yeah.
Fringilla. Okay. Wow. She's much more important than I even knew to understand.
Yeah. Because she's the one now, I'm asking an honest question. She's the one who like first tries and like the hand withers, right? Isn't that the same person?
I don't know. I don't know.
I thought you were educated on The Witcher now. I thought you knew.
No, I'm educated on the monsters, not on the mages.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
All I knew is the name, and it keeps popping up. And so by the end, you're like, oh, okay, Tesea and these. Yeah, that's all I'm trying to say is the show struggled for me to tell me why certain things mattered the way they did, so that when they come back, they're less cameos and more payoffs.
Got it. Okay.
The way it materialized was, oh, cool to see some cameos here. When I think the story wants them to be payoffs. Like this is the culmination. Because let's jump into 8 so that we have some scaffolding here.
Yeah, of course.
I don't remember the name of the town they're in. Seddon, Stratton, something.
Sodden.
Okay,
Doo-doo.
I kind of loved that whole set piece, which is effectively the entirety of episode 8.
Yeah.
And a sort of question to you is, what to you was the coolest execution of mage-ish abilities?
Oh my
God. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in that
a lot of really, really cool stuff.
Yes.
Stuff I had never seen before. So I'm going to give it to something that I had not seen before, because I've seen cool fire tricks, though there's some really cool fire tricks. And there's a lot of other things going on there too. The vines as the gateway sort of barrier, the vines sort of coming through, and then the Nilfgaardians trying to break through that to hurt her. But yeah, just the weave and the way they would try to weave around and like try to force their hand out or try to put pressure on them to draw their hand back and everything. I thought that was super inventive and really cool looking. Great visually to see the vines sort of creep in and create this little barrier. Yeah, it was really cool.
I'm going to throw out my answer to this question and then sort of pose a thing that I'm not sure I understood about the show.
Sure.
It might have told me and I just missed it. My favorite, actually just genuinely loved the sequence of boom, cool mage effect, boom, cool mage effect. I really liked that sort of rhythm. But I think one of the most effective ones, sort of on a character level too, is dude's name's Vilgefortz. And his not Vilgefortz, right?
Vilgefortz.
Doo-doo.
Doo-doo and Vilgefortz walk into a bar.
And was the sword guy. He keeps materializing the new swords. And that was just a really well executed action set piece. But I will own it if it just passed me by earlier, because this is the point I'm trying to make, is things I didn't quite comprehend were important that end up important. A thematic bit of yeast that gets kneaded into the dough of episode 8 is this reserve your chaos idea.
Yeah, right.
And specifically, Vilgefortz overextends himself. Because remember, Yennefer, I think in her telepathic, kind of utterances is like, hey, watch yourself. But basically says reserve your chaos. He keeps repeating one. I guess it also begs the question of how effective a swordsman he is if he keeps losing every sword he materializes. But that's a whole other conversation. But he eventually runs
I'm just
out.
a really bad wizard.
No, great wizard, bad swordsman. Did the notion of depleting or reserving chaos as a in video game parlance kind of energy bar, was that
your
present?
MPs?
Yeah, was that present
maybe.
Oh.
I don't know about present without because the only time we really get into the mechanics of magery is when in the early episodes when Yennefer is training,
right?
And then really the only other time that we see it where there's any question of how long can someone keep this up was the portals with Yennefer, where like it begins to be more and more of a struggle the more times she does this. And then she even says at one point, I think, I can't keep pace with this. I can't do this. So that concept, like in video games of like, oh yeah, their MPs are all like depleting and reducing. I do think it would be fair to say that that's a through line narratively. And I think because of where Yennefer's story ends, I would affirm that I think they're trying to say something about a through line thematically, because of course that's her big hero's moment at the end is when I know her name, I visualize seeing her name, but I don't. Is it Taissa?
No, Tissaia.
Tissaia.
Yep.
Okay. So when Tissaia tells her, "Let your chaos explode," and that's the narrative.
Release your chaos.
Really, yeah, and that's the. I thought she said, "Let your chaos explode." Maybe she said both. I don't remember. But she when Yennefer then takes that, I mean, the camera zooms in on her face. We see her kind of collecting herself. We see her collect the fire, which that was really cool, like where she pulled the fire into her fingertips from the distances, and then just sort of unleashed it everywhere. Really, really effective and powerful moment. So yeah, I would say that because that is the culmination of where she's been leading and who she's been trying to become, because now she's unleashing her force of power for, I guess you could say, for good ends. She's trying to protect and save this city. But back to your point about that being a thing that can be depleted, she's gone now. And again, I should say, I don't think this show wants us to think she's dead. But she is definitely gone.
Right.
She's completely vanished.
She'll be back.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think all I was trying to articulate is the putting specific language to it. Reserve your chaos, release your chaos. Like I couldn't remember if that sort of articulation had been present.
Right.
We're not formally we already did a Those Ain't Right, but I will add to the That Ain't Rights, at least in the traditional formula, is the wormy little monsters in the box.
Oh God! And they go in your ear, and
They reminded me of is it Wrath of Khan?
Yeah, it's Wrath of Khan, where that little sluggish thing gets into his ear. Most traumatizing moment in all of Star Trek history. That ain't right. Right. No, but it's that whole thing, because it threw me for a second when her friend attacks her in the tower.
Oh yeah.
And then I was like,
I thought it was just mind control, but yeah.
But yeah, but it threw me off for a second when I saw that, until I saw those things and realized
Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, that's when it finally clicked. Like, oh, that's why there's some despair there. But what I didn't get is, I don't know if Vilgefortz. I don't know if it's Vilgefortz. Boy, I had the Strega last night, and now I got the Vilgefortz. So,
let the doodoo get you.
No, there it is. But in the final moment, we see him. He kills one of his own, and I couldn't tell.
Does he? I don't remember that part.
Yeah, well, because the guy against the tree who's wounded is like, "Oh, help me!" And then he just like Help me!
Is he that pathetic?
And he's just like, you're
Pick apart.
dead. but I mean,
Always said my name wrong.
but I think that I couldn't discern, maybe savvier listeners will know, I couldn't discern if his deception was choice or if he was mind controlled like the rest. I don't know. And
Yeah,
I couldn't tell because it didn't show me that he was being like controlled by one of those worm things or anything. So I don't know if I got the impression that this was like he was really like sort of a double agent or something, but I don't know if that was the impression I was supposed to get or not.
or a double magent.
Wow.
Ooh.
Clever girl.
Yeah.
So like, but I think that's what I mean.
I'd love the thought of Jacob listening to this conversation and be like, oh my God, you guys did not pick up on anything.
I want so badly to tell you everything. Yes.
In his defense, I love your lilac and gooseberries note, Jacob.
Man, that was
perfect.
wonderful.
That
That
was
was so delightful. But I do think it's like, that's why I keep coming back to this notion of I feel like they ended at their next to last episode. I would have liked to have seen one more thing. But again, Yennefer's plotline was really done because I feel like her, storyline for this season reached a satisfying conclusion to its arc. And I think in the sense that Geralt and Ciri are now together, that also did so. But there's still a lot going on to this world that I'm like, I don't really get a payoff for that, But anyway.
And do you comprehend the general motivation of the Nilfgaardians? Like it feels like
Conquest? I don't know.
Right. Okay. But it feels like some of that conflict is rooted at the banquet, right?
Yeah, but I get the impression that Sentra is something of a controversial figurehead, like to the end. But I don't know why. The town, and Calanthe as a leader. It's like I get the impression that maybe it's like a class thing, and maybe it's like the Sentrans are the big, like ultra elite, but and the Nilfgaardians are the ones that are wanting to like rise up and reclaim their agency, ownership, or something. I don't know. I'm trying to connect.
There's a character named Mousesack. I'm like, I don't.
Wow.
What?
Yeah, Mousesack.
Now I do love. That's one of my favorite scenes in 7 and 8 is the teleporting. When Geralt, when they corner him in the basement, and Mousesack is with him, and he makes him teleport them. That's
that was pretty awesome. That was pretty awesome. I think there is a conversation. What?
Nothing. Just us trying to talk our way through these characters and places.
Yeah. Where they are and what they do. I think so. Jacob brought up something. Listeners heard it when they read it, and I do think it's interesting. It's an interesting exploration of this notion of fate and destiny, which that is unquestionably a thematic through line throughout everything. I mean, it's I kind of joked about it earlier, but that's the note that Geralt narrates for you when he and Ciri finally embrace. I do still think the moment might have been more powerful if they'd have just embraced and that be it, but it's fine. And I feel like that concept of Geralt as a character constantly pushing and pulling against what everybody keeps saying is his destiny, I do think that's an interesting exploration that the show is trying to do. And that him being a witcher, which is not, again, as Jacob pointed out, they're not really accepted anyway. They're more tolerated than anything else. And I feel like he's uniquely positioned to kind of be the guy you want in the room, but the guy you don't want in the room, as well, because he's so unpredictable and, he makes his own choices in terms of even sometimes when he's conscripted to do certain things, he's not necessarily going to go the route that you expected him to go. He's not necessarily, he's not going to try to kill the Striga. He's going to try to save the Striga. And I find that really very compelling. And I do think some of what the show was playing around with about fate and destiny and what's predetermined and what is the result of your own choices, I think there's some really interesting stuff there. I just kind of really resonate a lot with what you say, that it's like I respect and admire the story they're trying to tell. I think their storytelling is getting in their way in a couple of these sort of, just with the layout of this first season. Another big reason why I'm so fascinated to see what the second season does is I want to see if they are just pure linear now. Like, I want to see now, do we just follow, I say certainly,
yeah,
but
I mean,
but
that's more wishful thinking than anything,
yeah,
I guess.
it's like, but I'm not really sure exactly where they, how they're going to construct the second season now that Ciri and Geralt have found each other, and presumably by Ciri's last line, gonna go on a search to, reconcile with Jennifer, yeah, but with Yennefer. So I am interested to see that, but yeah, I am. I mean, questions and considerations of determinism and fate and destiny. I think my biggest thing is the show is interested in asking that question. I don't know that it's interested or as interested in exploring the ramifications of someone's journey through that. Like, because I feel like Geralt, pretty much embraces that. Yeah, Ciri's my responsibility, and I'm coming to protect her or try to protect her, despite Calanthe sort of being like, "No, you can't ever." So I'm going to give you.
I mean, he does reject that mantle for some time.
True, and I can't remember. I think they laid it out for us in 7, but I can't remember what is it that ultimately drives him back to embrace. Do you remember? Do you know? I don't. I'm asking if you remember.
No, I just think the number of times over the last 4 weeks when one of us says, "I can't," did it say it?
Do
or
you
did
remember?
We...
I don't know.
Episode 7 is called Before Fall. No. So I was wondering, did 6 feed into it? 6 ends with the big Geralt and Yennefer fight. Then Geralt gets mad at Jaskier, yeah, and they all part ways. But 7 begins with Geralt warning Malsac of the Nilfgaardians on the move. So that's him catching up to it. But I can't. But you're kind of making the point. You've got characters moving through a story, and I'm really uncertain why certain choices are being made.
Yes. Yeah.
Which sounds good to say because destiny, but that's also cheap storytelling too. Like now I'm going to give some shout outs here for what I thought was happening in the banquet. I could be totally wrong here. when so the law of surprise is bestowed upon Geralt, which is why, or Duny offers him that, which commits he and Ciri to each other. Am I not wrong? Duny also invokes it as having been gifted to him, which is why he's now there.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Yes. He's there to claim his bride, which was his reward for the law of surprise. That's his claim. Yes.
And as one thing I found actually really interesting about that, and I think you had said you thought this was Pavada's powers, and this is where I joked, like, can everybody do something here? But remember the maelstrom that hits?
Yeah, the big cyclone thing?
Yeah. I may be totally wrong. I interpreted that because I think that's after that happens in response to Calanthe trying to kill him. Remember when
she stops Calanthe from killing him by screaming, and then it's immediately after that the cyclone sort of raises them up. Yes.
Well, I'm going to tell you how I read that scene.
Okay.
Is that the cyclone was destiny itself.
Ooh.
Asserting its care over, which is why I was not saying I thought. I am not certifiably disagreeing with you because I just don't know. I didn't think Pavada had powers. I thought she just screamed, and the active essence of destiny was asserting the law of surprise in their favor, subverting Calanthe's attempts to kill him, saying no.
My only my only challenge to that is that when the maelstrom subsides, Calanthe comes to Pavada and says, "I thought your grandmother's powers had skipped you the way it had skipped me." She directly calls out. Now, that's not to say that it's the maelstrom. Maybe it was the scream. I don't know, but I just know that I just know that Calanthe says. I remember that Calanthe says to her, "I thought your grandmother's powers had skipped you the way they skipped me." Something to that line, to that end.
Well, then who the hell knows, Reed?
But I think
before you follow that train, all I was trying to establish in both of these instances is because you referenced Geralt and Ciri at the end, and I'm piggybacking a bit on Jacob's the track he was laying there. Was I kind of like the idea, however misreading I might have done of the banquet scene. I was taken, at least momentarily, and like the idea that destiny might have form and substance in this world that's going to we can use the word predestined if we want, but I don't think it's that simple and reductive a way to phrase it, but just the things that are meant to be together by commitment and by spirit will be together. And I think that's a really cool and really powerful sort of idea.
No, absolutely. And I think that it's worth considering, and I like although, again, this is not meant to be a backhanded compliment, although I still feel convinced that was pretty much Pavada's powers because of that one line. I like the idea of destiny being an unseen entity that's sort of like tying all these things together. I agree with you. I think that's pretty profound. And I don't know, it's like when you get into some of those subjects about our own life and we get into the senses of determinism and the senses of, in theological speak, people talk about predestination, but in general, the push and pull that, of what is inevitable versus what we influence with our own decisions, and what those of us who believe in God as we do, what God influences with what takes place. What was it inevitable because, okay, I'm going to speculate some really heady things here very quickly, but are things inevitable because they are set in motion and we cannot change them? Are things inevitable because when we begin, as the narrative in Genesis tells us of the Tower of Babel, when things begin to go in a way that God says, no, not this way, he intervenes in some way, or, comes in and subverts something or sideswipes something in that capacity? Or is it purely the automatic end result of all of the different choices that individual human beings make in individual scenarios? Dropping a little Ian Malcolm with like chaos theory from Jurassic Park. It's like the idea that there are this myriad of different choices, microscopic variations to the choice. Even things that would say like, okay, if we end this conversation at an hour 30 as opposed to an hour 20 or something, whatever it is, that small variation in things may have ripple effects that then carry over into a number of other incalculable factors.
Right.
So either it's all sort of the dance of will, or is it predetermined? Go ahead with what you're about to say.
I was just going to say, well, there it is.
And there it is. The only one on my side is a blood-sucking lawyer. Yeah.
No, I think my brain is too small for that. I mean, I think I remember referencing this on the show one time. I don't remember in what context, but of listening to. I've got a peer who is a self-professed atheist that I have known for decades now, and really great guy. And he tipped me off to this kind of physicist person, and I went looking. I was like, oh, I should kind of have some knowledge of this and hear this out and see what's up, and listening to this physicist. And I may be overlapping some influences there, but listening to this physicist in a particular podcast interview, and it was just mind-blowing. He's like, nothing you do is your own choice. Like,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, just from in this weird, it's been a while since I've listened to it, this weird kind of cosmic meta macro scale. He's like, yeah. You're not doing anything that is of your own will. Like, oh God.
But he's talking, and I'm not going to ask you to remember too many particulars of this because good luck.
Fail.
But
yeah.
But you should be able to probably at least answer this, I think. And if not, then no judgment. But was he speaking from a position that like there's a force that is sort of tilting the scales one way or another, or is it cosmologically mathematics that like, hey,
yeah.
okay, so cosmology,
it was
mathematics.
It was now. You may be saying something really specific I'm unaware of, but I'm simply saying it was less divine
right.
sort of hand
Yes.
and more just this is just the way the universe is operating, and you're just a participant in it, or
that basically our
non-participant.
Sure. I guess because something that I have pondered before. I've been talking a lot to my son who has a pretty strong fear of bugs, and that's just something.
You should show him the episode with the Jiminy Cricket thing.
Yeah, he'd love that.
I'm sure.
That's great. It'd be fun in my household. I'll have to do sleep regression for the next like 2 years. But but I think, when I'm talking to him about it, I'm talking about, just the things the animals do, and talking about instincts. I'm just like, it's just their instinct, that bee that you're so terrified of is
just
merely
a Q-tip with legs.
Wow, yeah. Let me show you Candyman. That'll really do a number.
Didn't harm him, son.
No,
it's
see,
like
look.
You show him Candyman in order to diminish his fear of bees. It's
right.
Okay.
And he's like, oh my God. He's like, the housing projects. Oh my God.
He's like, Dr. Burke is so nice. Oh God, Daddy.
Maybe I should give therapy a chance. Nope.
Ooh, well,
unintended takeaway.
Yep.
But I think the thing that's worth considering is that, like, I'm trying to emphasize that bee is just trying to get from one flower to another. It's just on its path. It's doing what it has the instinct to do, and is following those different things. And I would wonder, getting back to cosmological mathematics, is the postulate that, we are creatures of instinct. It's just that because we have layered on so much of our own either self-awareness or, the ponderings of our own existence and things like that, that we are under the illusion that we are not operating from instinct, but rather from decisive, this is the choice that I'm making. And obviously I should just probably seek out the episode and listen to what he has to say. But
except that I can't tell you his name. So, that seems predestined that would
good
be
luck.
the case.
Yeah. I guess there's this mythical conversation I'm never going to get to, So, but I do think,
the takeaway is this was all meant to be, Reed.
But I think it's, and scriptures, I mean, there are a myriad of different theological positions on this. I'm not going to articulate them all because that's boring, but I'm just like that. But I think, it is worth wrestling with how much is intervened upon, and how much is, because I'll express my own. I'll make it personal for a minute. Like, I'll express my own, like, where I sit with it, honestly, is very much not because I sit at some church of Stephen King or whatever, but is very much the way that Stephen King has.
You kind of do.
Let's back off. So you're not my therapist. No, I'm just kidding. But no. I mean, like, Stephen King's postulates on this subject align pretty closely with my own, which is there are things in the world that are pushing us towards order, and there are things in the world that are pushing us towards chaos. Now, I'm going to use the words order and chaos. I'm going to ask you, Nathan, and any listeners not to get too hung up on that. I'm just kind of adopting that there are things which are pushing towards good ends. Oh, she's awesome. Yes. Listeners don't know that he just held up WandaVision for me, Wanda Maximoff. But this notion that the things are pushing upon each other, and that there are things working in the world to produce good and health and wholeness, and there are things working in the world to produce not that, the opposite to that end, and that we as people are caught a bit in the balance of those two sort of streaming forces. I have frequently pondered, and I don't know how much this has arrested people's imaginations before. Maybe I'm somewhat solitary in this, or at least a rare species that I contemplate this. But between the Old Testament and the New Testament, 400 years of silence from God. No judges, no prophets, no anything. Just 400 years of silence. And the fact that in terms of biblical textual history, God just bows out of the conversation for 400 years. But then the end result of that is that then we dive into the New Testament, and it's the coming of Christ is the sort of culmination. The first time that God speaks after 400 years is to Zechariah to say, hey, your wife's going to give birth to John, and then to Mary through Gabriel that she's going to give birth to Jesus. And so it's like you have this long stretch of time where there's just nothing, no intervention. Generations come and go, no intervention whatsoever. It is and this is what arrests my imagination significantly. It's this notion of there was that precedented time in history where people were born and people died and lived their entire life. I do not believe God was not watching, and I do not believe God was not, doing what, with acting with great intention, but he was silent in that span of time and was not actively sort of interacting with anybody. And so when people talk about the role of God in our day-to-day lives and the role of people in like our own sort of push against determinism and is everything predestined? Were we destined to start this podcast, become friends, do all of these other kinds of things? It is fascinating to me to explore the ways in which I feel like I am my own person, but I feel like it's really difficult for me to deny that I am being pushed and pulled upon by things beyond my unseen self.
Sure.
Whether that be cosmological mathematics, whether that be, as I do believe, the active, intentive presence of Christ and the Holy Spirit and God, whether that be, things that are of a more malevolent nature that are maybe, feeding off of what would otherwise be good and wholesome in who I am and for, their own intents and purposes. But I just think that's kind of where I sit with it, that I hang in the balance of all of that, and that, I'm responsible for my choices, which is why I think they're my choices. I think if something was predetermined, I don't know how I could be responsible for them. Maybe that's just something maybe that's a bridge I just can't cross. But I'm like, yeah, if it's all predetermined, I don't know how I could be held accountable or responsible for, what happened. And I do believe in personal accountability and personal responsibility, which is why I believe our choices are our choices.
And at the same time, it's kind of fun to ponder that we were destined to make this show together.
I mean, I do like that. Like, I shared, when I paid tribute to my late friend Randy, I shared that I loved his sentiment where he said, take a moment, look around, and realize that our stories couldn't have finished without each other. I find that genuinely lovely.
Sure.
And I do think that I just feel by and large that obviously I believe in what some might call an interventionist God. I believe in a God who at his will and pleasure sometimes steps into time to transact, if you will. Do I believe that's the sum total of our relationship with God? No, I don't. I don't believe that. But I do not believe, as far more of the founding fathers were more deists than they were like evangelicals than people were, which is, the deist vision is that, God set the world in motion and then kind of, the clockmaker, that he's in his perpetual and then God rested sort of state of things. But I don't feel that way. I have kind of experienced too much personally to make me feel that way. But it is interesting to ponder, and I don't necessarily embrace the notion that the future is set, but I do think it's possible that there are certain things which inevitably will come about to be. Whatever that is, whether that's as something as morbid or final as we will die, whether that is something, or like grow old or something like that, or whether that's things that are a little bit more lovely, like, progressions of path towards health, depending on the choices you make and the people around, who surround you. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm making sense. I'm just, these are the things that I think about in this conversation about fate and destiny and free will and all of that kind of thing. You look to me like a man with thoughts to share. It could be that you're just a man with thoughts to think.
Let destiny decide which.
Let us flip a coin.
There are thoughts, they are half formed or even a quarter so, and there's risk of coming out babbling, but so
like I just did.
It's funny. I think there's a deep part of me that is actively resistant to a deterministic kind of framework, but that's my nonconformist kick against the goads
right
type of persona. I think in this immediate second, I don't even mean this era of life, I mean this literal moment, I kind of am okay with the idea of a destiny-esque influence on certain things. I don't think destiny, or if we want to get kind of Christian about it, God cares what Marvel Legend figure I have on my desk.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
But there are times I think about, I actually think you're probably correct in your textual reading of the banquet scene. The romantic in me likes the idea that love and romantic love is a spoke on the wheel of a destiny concept. Right. I often think when the moment comes, and there's no need to put so much weight on it that it has to be one moment, but many conversations over time, when I talk to my children about what I think is a rather silly evangelical notion of the one, this person, singular of 8 billion people in the world. There's only one and only one, and if you miss that, you've missed it. I think that's a bit, I don't know, silly feels like a mean word, but it's the one that's coming to me in the moment. At the same time, I think there's a firmament that could be stood on, that a person can become the one to you. If that distinction makes any sense.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
And I've followed this rabbit trail specifically just to say, like, I think it's hard for me to say, oh, we were destined to be together, or you and I were destined to make the fear of God together. I do like the idea that we have become destined to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I find that really lovely and really,
me too, yeah,
heartening and not betraying of the nonconformist version of me either. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's the both and. Maybe I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too. But I do like cake. So
cake is good. I'll throw one thing out there, and then maybe this is our sort of landing pad to wind it home. Like, I think a lot about Christ and his temptation in the wilderness, and that question in the garden of, is there any other way to do this? And the frequency of times when he said, he told them that he was going to die and rise again in 3 days. And so I think here's the best way that I can articulate this. When I think about Christ and what happened there, it was set in motion. It was prophesied. I'm going to articulate a bunch of things in quick succession just to sort of wrap up my framework and then say where I think we fit into this from my point of view, from my vantage point. A bunch of things were set in motion. Christ was born, Christ lived, Christ died, and Christ rose. I believe all of these. And then in the midst of that, and then not to forget about the temptation as well, in my mind and in my understanding of the theological construct, if it was not possible for Christ to have succumbed to temptation, then the victory over temptation meant next to nothing. If it was not possible for him as a man to have succumbed to temptation, then his victory in temptation was little more than an inevitable box check. In the same token, if it were not possible for him to endure the cross and endure death and rise again, and were not possible to somehow undermine what his mission was through that process, then his mission meant nothing. If it's a box check, then that's all it is. It's just a box check. So the way that I kind of try to reconcile our position within these things is there are paths upon which we're set and places which I believe the Lord would have us to go, and places, and I also think, speaking of that, I also think about what Jesus told to Peter at the end of John, which I've invoked before, where he said, someday someone's going to put you in clothes you don't want to wear and take you to a place you don't want to go. Well, if there's absolutely no sort of forecast, then a statement like that is nonsense. It means nothing. But I don't believe it's nonsense. I believe that there is sort of like a path we set ourselves upon, and that we walk that path, hopefully in faithfulness, as Eugene Peterson would describe it, along obedience in the same direction. Like I hope we walk that path faithfully. But at the same token, I do believe there is capacity along the way for us to make choices that might either divert us from that path, whether temporarily or not, or might just culminate in things that were not necessarily automatic outcomes of it. And we don't have time. We definitely don't have time, maybe don't have depth in this conversation to wrestle with all of the complexities of Adam and Eve eating the fruit in the garden, the flood and its ramifications, David being anointed when Saul was still king, all of these different things that are collisions of destiny and purpose, but also choice, and also this, where we sit in the flow of it. But where I try to sit is in a place that I believe is true of Christ in those moments, that it is possible to make the wrong decisions, and it is possible to make decisions which will not produce good outcomes and not produce good in my life. But I have been set upon a course where I will be nudged, pushed, guided, instructed, hopefully led is probably the best word, to the right choices, which will then be mine to make or not. And that is kind of how I view my world in the scheme of things, that I will be guided, led to the places where I will have the opportunity to make the right choices, and then it is up to me to make them or to not.
Like you're propping up me for the black hole paradox,
I don't know.
And Anne just watches from the
Oh man, I don't know. Maybe. Boy, that article.
Yeah, it was intense.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, in the interest of sort of putting a button on it so that we can maybe go to the fog meter for Witcher season 1, that's my take on that piece. And I know for myself, I sit quite often with that understanding of, well, the choice is mine to make, whether or not I made it as a result of inevitability or I made it as a result of agency. The choice is still mine to make, and it's kind of up to me to do everything that I can with my choices. Is like I just don't have all the information, and so I have to make the best choices that I possibly can, given the information that I do have, and that's how we navigate our, was it destiny? Was it choice? As Forrest Gump would say, maybe a little bit of both. Was it destiny or
Did
fate? And he said,
Forrest Gump say that?
Forrest Gump said,
I thought you were quoting Star-Lord there.
No, no. Forrest Gump said, because I think Star-Lord quotes Forrest Gump, but he's like, no, he doesn't, because he left in the 80s.
Yeah.
But no, he stands at Jenny's grave and he said, was it fate or was it choice? Maybe a little bit of both happening.
Maybe both.
He says it that way. Yeah, he does.
Right.
Oh man, should we put this in the books before you go to Bubba Gump's Shrimp Castle? Whatever.
Can't sit here.
Oh no.
Yeah, let's do it. Striga.
Okay. All right. Fog meter is our very specific metric. You know it by now, of fear and God, how we measure the scares and the substance of the material that we cover. We are covering now Witcher Season 1, wrapping up. And so I am going to lead the charge on fear. Not terribly nightmarish, but man, the monsters are awesome. So while it's not terribly frightening, I'm going to give it a 6 just for the monsters and creature designs alone. We covered them at the top of the show, but yeah, I'm going to go 6 for the fear measurement.
I'll join you. I didn't mean to overthink that. Yep.
Here I go.
Yep,
Here
go
I go.
for it. It's destined.
What would you say on the God measurement?
I don't know. I think it name drops a lot of thematic touch points. It's hard for me to kind of see a well-formed picture painted there. For the God, I'm gonna go with a 5.
Okay. It's funny because the number that I'm landing on is for comparable reasons is a 4. I think for me it's, you said it so succinctly and great that it's like I really like the story being told. The storytelling gets in the way, which makes it really hard for me to know concretely what's on its mind and what's just baked into the conversation. I think the earlier episodes do a better job of substantiating some thematic elements than the later episodes do. Stuff like wrestling with the lesser of two evils and things like that I think are really interesting.
Yeah, actually, I wrote that down, and that's episode 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that means that we give The Witcher Season 1 5 out of 10 on the fog meter, which perfectly respectable showing. Man, the tricky question, and I'll go first. Would I recommend The Witcher Season 1? I'm going to cop out and reserve my answer until I see Witcher Season 2. Because...
Oh, I thought you were saying, I'm going to go first. I'm going to cop out. Nathan, you go.
No.
That's what I thought you were doing.
No, because I think how I feel about Season 2.
No. I'm not going to let you do it. I'm not going to let you off that hook.
I've got to do...
I'm not going to let you off Candyman's hook there. Do you recommend Season 1?
I don't yet. I might change my tune if season... So, yeah, don't let me off the hook. That's fine. My answer is no, I don't recommend Witcher Season 1. Season 2 may turn me around to that. But ultimately, the experience was something that I do not regret. I am happy to have watched it. It's not something that I'm going to really get out there and champion for a bunch of people to see. I may feel differently when Season 2 comes around. But what about for you?
I think it's an extremely qualified recommend.
Okay.
Like, this has happened. I have some colleagues who were Game of Thrones fans, and I asked them if they'd seen it, and no, I was like, you might actually like it. So like, I have kind of softly recommended it.
Gotcha. Yeah, sure.
But
yeah.
when I do, when it comes up, it is with the qualifier, like just hold
Understood.
on tight for a little bit.
Sure. Understood.
So, again, I actually, the tropes that are present, I appreciate.
Sure. Yeah.
And by the end of it, like I said, it is not, this is not me just trying to save face. There were moments in those last 2 episodes where I was like, doggone it, I'm kind of curious what I am kind of missing from the first episodes now.
Right, of course.
Would make this a little more impactful. That's not a backhanded compliment. Like, they're not there. I'm saying there probably were some stuff there. I just missed it because I didn't know what I was being fed. So yeah, I would say it's an extremely qualified recommend.
Okay. All right. Well, here's what I will say. I have some big applause to heap on Jacob Sane's way for sending us through this journey, because, as I said, it's an experience that I don't regret. I will be queuing up season 2, whether we decide to cover it on the show or not. And
I'm
that's
curious.
not nothing. Yeah, I'm very curious to see where they go next. So thank you very, very much, Jacob, for taking us on this journey. Nathan, thank you for walking the journey with me. Next week, it should be noted, we have 3 weeks left of the What Scares Us segment of this year. So we will be very soon issuing, kind of what's next. Obviously, the back half of the year is going to be What Saves Us, with a hopefully very fun and pretty off the wall intermission in between of some things that we have planned. But for the next 3 weeks, we will be wrapping up the submissions that we've received for What Scares Us. We won't be able to get to everything. Thank you so much for everybody who's got it. But next week, we are going to be going to a film. I should have looked up the director. I only know Ryan Reynolds in a coffin.
Oh.
No, Ryan Reynolds in a coffin. We're going to be going to next week to the film Buried, hearkening back to what Jess said last week about being trapped. Boy, talk about being trapped.
I thought about that when she was mentioning it.
Yeah. So we're going to be covering Ryan Reynolds starring Buried next week, and that'll be the first of our last 3 of the What Scares Us submissions. Nathan, thank you again so much for this conversation. Thank you again, Jacob, for driving us here. And as we say on every episode, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And in that spirit, we encourage you to fear nothing else and be on your way rejoicing. We'll see you next week, everyone.
See you guys.
Bye.
At the continent.
The incontinent.
Continental breakfast.
He's not just continent, he's incontinent. No, I'm just kidding.